Hi, I'm Olivia. My sister told me not to come to our mother's funeral, said I just wanted her jewelry. She said it like a favor, like exile was kindness. But what hurt more wasn't the accusation. It was the years that led up to it. Years of smiling over casseroles, paying the mortgage on a house I wasn't allowed to step foot in, watching them divvy up memories like coupons while I was still grieving. They edited me out of the photos, cropped me from the stories. But when they sold off my mother's legacy and called it closure, I didn't scream. I handed them a receipt. Want to know what it said? I arrived exactly 7 minutes before the service started. Not late, not early. Just enough time to breathe in the cold Oregon air and convince myself this wasn't a mistake. The air outside St. Elora's chapel was sharp with cedar and frost. That smell always reminded me of fourth-grade field trips and my mother's perfume in winter, clean, contained, controlled. I hadn't been back in nearly 2 years. Not since the last Thanksgiving, when I left before dessert. Not since I said less than I should have, and heard even less in return. Still, you show up for funerals, no matter the history. As I approached the front steps, I glanced at the display board listing names of close family members and their reserved seating. My eyes followed each row. Isolde, of course, was listed first. Then our cousins, aunts, even Aunt Judith's new husband, who'd only been around for 6 months, had a printed card. Mine? Missing. Not misplaced. Absent. A volunteer in a Navy windbreaker glanced up from her clipboard and smiled in that overtrained customer service way. Hi there. Are you a family guest or here with the community? Her voice was quiet, but it felt like a loudspeaker against the silence I'd been swimming in since stepping on the property. I blinked. I think I smiled. Then I said, I used to live in that woman's womb. I guess you tell me. She stammered, apologized, offered me a folded program. It was light blue with white lilies printed on the front. Dolores June Wallace, 1949 to 2023. I opened it. No mention of my name in the survived by section. Even the youngest cousins were listed. I didn't ask questions. I didn't make a scene. I found the last folding chair near the aisle, close enough to see but far enough to disappear. The room was beautiful. Everything was white and gold and painfully perfect. A string quartet played something somber and forgettable. Every family member sat front and center, Isolde flanked by our mother's church friends and a dozen second cousins. No one looked at me. No one nodded. The ushers avoided eye contact like it was an Olympic sport. My name didn't fade, I thought. It was removed. As I unfolded the program again, pretending to be busy, I felt eyes on me. 2 rows ahead, a woman I didn't recognize, maybe mid-60s, pearls, tightly wound bun, leaned into the man next to her. Their shoulders touched. They looked right at me. She's the one who moved away, right? She whispered, but not softly enough. Only showed up to see what she can take. The man shrugged. Closure, or jewelry, he muttered. I smiled. Not because it was funny, because there was nothing left to do. Smiling was armor. I'd heard versions of that line before, just not at my mother's funeral, and certainly not from strangers who were now acting as the gatekeepers of who belonged and who didn't. You don't need to raise your voice to erase someone, I remembered reading once. You just stop calling their name. I set the program down and looked around. Every bouquet had a card. Every memory table was curated to feature Isolde's milestones with our mother, her graduation, her wedding, her baby shower photos. Nothing of mine. Not a single photo of my 10th birthday party, even though I remembered Mom saying it was her favorite, because I was the only one who made my own cake and didn't cry when it flopped. I pulled out my phone, pretending to check a message, but what I really did was scroll through old emails. I'd searched for the original funeral invite twice before, but now I looked again. No times, no seating plan, no roles listed, just a line from Isolde. Thought you'd want to come. Totally up to you. Totally up to me. but everything about today felt like it had already been decided. The email chain had gone quiet weeks ago. I hadn't even realized I'd been dropped from it until now. This wasn't grief. This was narrative control. The quartet stopped. A soft chime rang once. The first speaker approached the podium, a family friend, if memory served. I looked toward the front again. There she was. Isolde, wearing pearl earrings, hair pinned back, black dress tailored like she'd stepped out of a courtroom drama. She avoided my eyes but smiled warmly at everyone else. She'd planned this, every second, every omission, every seat, every silence. She decided my morning should be invisible. Her voice echoed from the front of the chapel, measured, almost lyrical. Isolde had always known how to craft a tone that made people lean in. She began the first reading, quoting something vague and digestible about legacy, love, and leaving the world better than you found it. I stood quietly from my folding chair and slipped through the side aisle. My heels tapped once, twice, then vanished into the thick carpet of the hallway. Outside, the air was colder than I remembered. Oregon chill had a way of sitting on your skin like unfinished business. I pulled my coat tighter, walked a few feet toward the edge of the building where no one could see me, and finally exhaled. I unlocked my phone, not to scroll, not to text, but to stare. I wasn't looking for anything new. I was rereading what I already knew. Her text was still there. Isolde, 1 week ago. No greeting, no signature, just 7 words and 2 sentences. Don't come. We all agreed. This isn't about you. I must have read it 20 times that night. The first 10 out of confusion, the next 10 out of disbelief. By the 20th, I realized she didn't need me to understand. She just needed me to stay gone. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it. I didn't even delete it. Some texts become landmarks. That one? It was a scar, a permanent lock screen notification that no update could bury. I remember exactly where I was when I got it, sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of tea I never finished. I had been waiting for the group thread to light up with flight info, casserole assignments, the usual last-minute chaos. Instead, my phone stayed quiet, until that single message rolled in. Like the last chapter of a book, someone else had already written the ending to. The next morning, I searched my inbox for any sign of an estate meeting. There was nothing. No calendar invites, no PDF attachments, not even a passive-aggressive subject line with FYI only in it. Silence in my family had never been accidental. It was a decision made in committee and delivered with plausible deniability. Back in the chapel, the heat of the building had begun to press against the windows, fogging the glass. From where I stood, I could still see the rows of cousins. The same ones who used to call me when rent was late, or when they needed a recommendation letter, or a reference for a last-minute job. Now they laughed quietly, passing around a mint tin like nothing had shifted. They hadn't just accepted the decision. They'd voted. That realization landed harder than I expected. I wasn't just uninvited. I had been ruled out by unanimous consent, and no one had raised a hand in protest. Behind me, the chapel doors opened slightly. I caught the tail end of someone saying, "Split her jewelry, divided up the boxes." Another voice responded, "Isolde said Olivia wouldn't care." They didn't lower their voices. They didn't notice I was right there. I leaned closer to the edge of the wall, heart oddly calm. My mind sharpened with every syllable. The locket. My mother's gold locket. I'd saved up for it, picked it out, had it engraved. I knew where she kept it, on a velvet pad in the top drawer beside her bed. They'd already gone through her things. Before the service. Before the burial. Before I had even landed in town. My fingers curled into fists inside my pockets. They didn't think I should be told, because in their eyes, I didn't matter. Not enough to call. Not enough to delay a meeting. Not even enough to lie convincingly. I pulled out my phone again. Not to check the time, but to open my Dropbox folder labeled Mom. The folder wasn't filled with pictures or letters. It had documents, scanned receipts, warranties, emails, quiet proof of my role in her life. One of them stood out now. Lock Jewelry Gift 2018 PDF. I highlighted it, starred it, and whispered to myself, "This will matter." I didn't go back inside. I didn't need to hear another word about legacy. I stood under the archway as her voice floated through the double doors. It no longer moved me. I stared out across the parking lot, watching a couple help their elderly mother into a sedan. The woman reminded me of mine, fussy with seatbelts, always cold, always pretending she wasn't. I felt something shift in my chest, not grief exactly, but something adjacent to it. "You can't mourn what's already been stolen," I said aloud. Not to anyone, just to myself. The cold trailed behind me, like a coat I couldn't take off. I walked slowly back into the chapel, the way someone walks into a room they know doesn't want them. Everyone else was drifting toward the refreshment area, murmuring condolences, planning dinners they didn't really want to host. I moved in the opposite direction, toward the hallway near the offices, where the quiet lingered. That's where I saw the table, long white linen, a display of personal artifacts curated with care. Framed photos, a few scarves, a dried bouquet tied with a ribbon, and a sign taped neatly to the front. Dolores's personal items, private family access only. Below it was a list that didn't have my name on it, not even my first initial. My fingers hovered over the edge of a box labeled Isolde, for transport only. A lock dangled from the handle. Something about the metal clicking against cardboard sounded final, like a line had been drawn and laminated. You'd think losing your mother would be the hardest part. But here, even grief came with a gate code. I didn't make a scene. I scanned the area to make sure no one was watching, then stepped slightly behind one of the floral stands. That's when I noticed something jammed near the base of a tall vase, bent, water-stained, like someone had dropped it and decided not to care enough to pick it back up. It was an envelope, addressed in handwriting that punched straight through my ribs. Liv. Only her handwriting looped the L like that. Only she spelled my name without the O when she was being tender. I reached down slowly, slid it out with both hands, and opened it as quietly as I could. The paper was thin, creased at the corners. The ink was slightly smeared in spots, like she'd written it during one of her foggy days. But the words were clear. Liv. Just in case I forget. You never made me feel alone. You showed up, even when you were tired. Especially then. It didn't say much more. Just enough. I stood there for a long moment, reading it again and again, until my eyes adjusted not to the light, but to the truth. Isolde had told everyone Mom stopped writing letters 2 years ago, that she didn't remember how. But here it was, 8 months old, tucked under a bouquet, nearly tossed with the trash. And now it was mine, not as a keepsake, but as evidence. I folded it once, gently, no creases over her words, slid it into my coat pocket. I turned back toward the display, and that's when I noticed something else. Another sealed box, small and wooden, with a tag that read, "For Isolde only." My name wasn't anywhere in sight. I asked one of the aides, a young woman no older than 20, with nervous hands and eyes that darted too quickly. Wasn't there one for me?" I asked. She hesitated, glanced toward the door. "There was, at some point, I think, but I didn't see it come in this morning." No apology. No explanation. It hadn't gone missing. It had been intercepted. That's what people do when they want to control the version of you that survives. I stepped back, taking it all in. The curated grief, the edited legacy, the lockbox labeled like a prize. A letter that almost got swept away with the discarded ribbon from a flower no one would remember next week. A box, a letter, a lock. You don't need more than that to know who someone really feared or loved. I didn't ask for the box. I didn't challenge the aid. I'd already learned that fighting in spaces built on silence just makes the walls thicker. Instead, I took out my phone, snapped a picture of the envelope, the letter inside. the locked box with the tag. One click per lie. Then I walked out of that room with one hand in my coat pocket. I didn't clutch the letter like some dramatic daughter in a movie. I just kept it near my body, not to keep it away from them, but to protect it from what they'd become. This wasn't just a family that forgot me. This was a family that wanted to erase my version of the past. The reception room was warmer than it should have been, both in temperature and tone. The fake graciousness wrapped around every word, every half-smile. I stood just inside the doorway, long enough for my coat to dry slightly, and for my hands to stop trembling from the cold, and from what I had just seen in that back hallway. There were tables, of course, linen-covered, centered with cheap centerpieces that tried too hard. And laid across each one were my mother's belongings, categorized, labeled, itemized like clearance stock from a gift shop. Sticky notes and tags, some handwritten, some printed, marked every object with a new name. Not hers, not mine. Just names that had shown up early enough to claim something. I spotted it immediately. A silk shawl, deep emerald, soft as breath. I'd given it to her on her 70th birthday. She wore it to her last Thanksgiving dinner. I remembered her saying, "I feel like someone wrapped me in a compliment." Now it sat folded inside a clear plastic bag. A paper slip taped on top. Estate item number 17, claimed by Isolde. The air left my chest slowly. I didn't touch it. I didn't ask. I didn't even walk closer. But I saw it. The fold line down the middle, the perfume still clinging to the fabric. You can smell betrayal. It smells like your mother's scent, covered in someone else's claim. I moved down the line, scanning each item with my eyes. A hairbrush, her reading glasses, a chipped tea set I remembered breaking one piece of when I was 13. They'd saved that too. But not one photo of me anywhere. A family assistant, Trish or Teresa, something with polite eyes, approached me with an envelope. "These were marked unclaimed," she said, handing it over like it was a participation trophy. I opened it slowly. A rosary I didn't recognize. A receipt for a sweater I didn't buy. Nothing of meaning, nothing of truth. I looked up. "Was the necklace in this?" She blinked. "Which necklace?" "Gold, oval locket, floral engraving on the front." "Oh," she said too quickly. "That one was assumed gifted, already assigned." My jaw didn't move. My face didn't change. But something inside me stiffened. "That was returned for a repair 3 months ago," I said flatly. "It wasn't hers to take." "Oh, well, Isolde said..." She stopped. "It's listed. I just hand things out." "Of course," I said, and tucked the envelope under my arm. In the background, the slideshow began again. A loop of curated nostalgia. Dolores holding Isolde's children. Dolores at Isolde's wedding. Dolores smiling in front of a beach I'd never been invited to visit. Frame after frame. Absence after absence. A voiceover came on, soft and rehearsed. Dolores cherished every token of love she received. I turned away before it finished. The irony burned too hot. They weren't dividing her. They were revising her. One object at a time. I moved to the edge of the table and stood near a cousin. Micah, I think. We hadn't spoken in 5 years. But he was always decent. I nodded toward the necklace's item tag, taped next to a picture of Dolores wearing it at her last Easter lunch. "I gave her that necklace," I said. "I have the receipt." Micah didn't respond. He looked down, then somewhere else entirely. And just like that, the whisper began. I saw it move. One cousin to another, a sideways glance, a lowered voice. "Olivia's not just here for ceremony. Olivia's not playing along." I wasn't. I was remembering accurately. I pulled out my phone, unlocked the camera, and took a picture of the tag on the shawl. Not because I needed evidence, because I was done letting memories become merchandise. No one stopped me. No one even looked my way after that. By the time I stepped outside again, the air had shifted. It wasn't any colder, but I felt less likely to be melted. In my hand, still warm, was the phone. On the screen, the photo, her shawl, her name erased, mine never written. If love could be relabeled, so could the truth. I didn't go home. I stayed. I stood at the edge of the reception hall, beside the buffet table no one touched yet, and watched Isolde float from one group to the next, like grief had made her lighter, not heavier. Her dress didn't wrinkle, her voice didn't shake. If I hadn't lived through our childhood, I'd believe she was actually the daughter she portrayed in public. She tapped her champagne glass with a spoon. Just once. Not loud enough to demand attention, but enough to draw it. Conversations hushed, chairs adjusted, everyone faced her. "I just want to thank everyone for coming," she began. "My mother was a force, a woman who loved hard and quietly. She taught us to honor family, to give back, and to forgive even when we're not sure how." Heads nodded. A few sniffles. She let the pause breathe, then leaned slightly forward. "Some grieve from afar," she said, voice silked with sympathy. "Some find other ways to remember. Let's honor that distance with grace." It was well written, perfectly timed. She'd practiced it, maybe even workshopped it with her therapist friends. It sounded caring. To anyone else, it might have sounded noble, but I knew exactly who she meant. She wasn't delivering a eulogy. She was delivering a warning. Don't ask why I'm not included. Don't question the story she curated. I felt something click inside me. Not rage, not yet. Just a sharp edge of recognition. "You didn't build a bridge, Isolde. You built a fence, and painted it gentle." The room murmured agreement, until a hand went up. 2 rows back, near the piano, an older woman in navy raised her fingers slightly. She stood after a beat and spoke in the clear, confident voice of someone who had spent her life being listened to. "Was Olivia not invited to speak?" she asked. The room snapped to stillness. "Dolores always mentioned how close they were in her letters," the woman continued. "She said Olivia reminded her of herself. I was surprised not to hear her voice today." For a second, all I heard was the shifting of shoes, the uncomfortable clearing of a throat. Then Isolde, ever the tactician, smiled softly. "We wanted to protect her peace," she said. "This week must be very complicated for her." She let the word hang. Complicated. As if I were too unstable to handle a microphone, too emotional to speak with clarity, too volatile to be trusted in public. I stood. Not quickly, not defensively. I didn't look at Isolde. I looked at the woman who'd asked the question and said, "Thank you for remembering what they'd rather forget." I didn't need to raise my voice. The truth didn't need volume to be heard. A shift moved through the crowd, subtle but real. People turned their heads, not toward Isolde, toward me. Not because I was loud, but because I was visible again. I walked to the back of the room and sat down next to the woman. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. Her presence beside me did what no speech could. It reminded me, and everyone else, that I wasn't the one who disappeared. I was edited, and this wasn't a story they could tell without leaving out the parts that didn't match the narrative. As Isolde transitioned into slideshow mode, someone dimmed the lights. Images flickered across the screen. Birthday parties, beach trips, a shot of Mom holding my niece. Me, again, conspicuously absent. "Let her grieve from afar," Isolde had said. But I was already closer than she ever dared to be. The slideshow faded out without applause. I stayed seated until the lights came back on, and the crowd dispersed into smaller huddles of chit-chat and faux concern. I didn't speak to anyone. I walked out the back door of the hall and got into my car, hands steady now, breath even. Later that evening, after a long detour to avoid small talk and a slower one to avoid thinking too hard, I pulled into the driveway of Isolde's house. The driveway lights came on as I parked. Her home had always looked like a catalog spread. Perfect landscaping, symmetrical porch furniture, not a single leaf out of place. It used to impress me. Now it just felt edited. Inside, the informal asset review, as they called it, was already underway. Cousins gathered around a kitchen island. An uncle leaned against the counter sipping decaf. On the table lay folders, envelopes, and 2 laptops. Trish, the estate attorney's assistant, handed me a printed copy of the will. My name was there, but barely. I flipped to the section I knew should have included the antique pendant. My mother's words had once been clear. Olivia gets the pendant. It's for solitude. She'll understand. But in this version, the paragraph was gone. Not reworded. Gone. I didn't blink. I didn't gasp. I simply reached for my phone, opened my cloud drive, and pulled up the PDF I'd scanned years ago, when Mom asked me to. I'd saved it then, out of instinct. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I knew how stories got retold in this family. There it was. The missing paragraph, in her handwriting, scanned alongside the notarized version. Timestamps. File history. Metadata. It was all there. Someone didn't revise the memory. They revised the document. I didn't say a word. I emailed the file to myself again, added a memo. For future use if needed. Then I stepped outside. I didn't need air. I needed distance. The sky was still, just past dusk. I walked to the edge of the lawn and opened my email again. I uploaded the document to a private drive, double-checked the security settings, then clicked save. They wanted quiet. So I gave them it. But not the kind they thought. Isolde stepped out a few minutes later, holding 2 mugs of tea. Chamomile? She asked. I took it. Not because I trusted her. Because I wanted her to see I wasn't avoiding her. I was observing her. We sat on opposite ends of the porch swing. She sipped. I didn't. I hope you understand, she said, voice low. Mom's last few months were... a lot. We tried to keep things simple. I nodded. Simple's easier to edit. She didn't respond. Inside, laughter bubbled from the kitchen. More sorting, more shifting of meaning. I went through the voicemail archive, I said after a pause. Isolde glanced at me. Oh? There was a file labeled D-Note, gone now. Oh, that, she said too quickly. That was just a grocery list. I told the tech guy to clean up the memory space. Nothing important. It hadn't been a grocery list. It was the last voicemail Mom left, one where she said my name, not just Olivia. She'd said, Liv, you make the world feel a little softer. I'd saved it. Now it was gone. Erased. Not corrupted. Not misplaced. Erased. I see, I said. She smiled. The same smile she used on doctors and bank clerks. The smile she wore at Mom's bedside while making notes in a planner no one else saw. I stood, handed her the untouched tea, and walked back to my car. No threat, no explosion, just a woman holding truth and waiting for someone to test her silence. Back in the driver's seat, I opened the drive again, added a new note, erased voicemail, removed section, observed edit patterns, proceed only if provoked. They didn't expect me to keep receipts. They expected me to stay quiet. Inside, I watched through the window as Trish leaned toward Isolde, speaking in hushed tones. I imagined what they were saying. I imagined how she'd spin this version too, but I didn't care. Not anymore. I wasn't here to win. I was here to witness. That's what scared them most. That same evening, after the last cup of coffee had gone cold and most of the sympathy hugs had dried up, we were all guided into a side room at the lodge. They called it the Legacy Room. It had theater-style chairs and a rented projector. On the walls were framed prints of wildflowers and river rocks, like peace could be arranged by a decorator. I sat in the back row, on purpose. It gave me the clearest view of the whole room. Who fidgeted, who avoided glances, who was truly watching and who was just waiting for dessert. The screen lit up, and there she was. Mom, Dolores, young and vibrant, holding a toddler version of Isolde. Another photo, Dolores pinning corsages on bridesmaids. Then Dolores reading a bedtime story to her first grandchild. A beach trip, a holiday dinner, a retirement party. Me? I appeared once. A blurry group shot from when I was maybe 5. No context, no name. Then gone. Not a single image of the 60th birthday I planned top to bottom. Not the hospital visits I coordinated. Not even the last Christmas gifts I sent overnight, each with a handwritten tag. They didn't forget me. They cut me out. Photo after photo, segment after segment, Isolde center stage. Every meaningful moment funneled into her narrative. The grieving daughter, the doting child, the keeper of memory. The slideshow ended with soft music and the words, "A life well lived," in script font. Then a woman I didn't recognize stepped up to the podium. She looked polished, gray-streaked hair in a bun, long black cardigan, reading glasses on a beaded chain. She cleared her throat and said, "I've been asked to read a letter left by Dolores, shortly before her passing." Heads turned. Eyes widened slightly. We hadn't heard about a letter. She unfolded the page and began. "My daughters, the light of my life. Always near me, always united in love and purpose." I stopped listening after that. It wasn't her. The tone was wrong. The phrasing was off. My mother didn't speak in cliches. She never used phrases like united in purpose. She called us stubborn in different ways, and bricks from the same kiln. I would have laughed if I wasn't grinding my teeth. The woman read for 3 more minutes. When she finished, there was soft clapping. Isolde beamed like she'd just won a scholarship in our mother's name. I leaned toward my cousin Brian, who sat 2 seats away. "Do you know who she is?" He shook his head. "I thought she was from hospice?" So did I, until the next morning, when I called the hospice center myself. Her name wasn't on staff, not as a nurse, not as a volunteer, not even on a temp list. They'd never heard of her. She wasn't a caregiver. She was hired. They scripted grief like it was theater, cast a woman to play sincerity, and no one thought to question it. Even grief was curated. Even love had casting. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't cause a scene. I sat still, watching. I watched as one uncle avoided my eyes. I watched as a cousin who used to beg for career advice quickly relocated to another seat. But I also saw one person nod in my direction. A quiet acknowledgement that not everyone was drinking the Kool-Aid. The room was splitting. Not in drama. In truth. You could feel the shift. The ones who knew and stayed silent. The ones who weren't sure anymore. And the few who had seen just enough to know something was off. I stood quietly before dessert was served. Walked out the side door. My car was parked under a dim lamp. Leaves had gathered under the windshield. I brushed them away slowly, deliberately. They had told their version. I hadn't told mine. Yet. The gathering wasn't as formal as the others had been. No seating chart, no podium. Just folding chairs, paper cups, and a buffet line that smelled faintly of overcooked ham. We were at Micah's place this time, a cousin with more garage space than judgment. The kind of person who always said, "I stay out of family drama," right before enabling it. I arrived just as they were passing around manila folders. Some people flipped through quickly. Others didn't bother reading at all. They trusted Isolde. Of course they did. I didn't sit. I stood near the fireplace, document folder tucked under my arm, watching her. She looked relaxed. Relaxed in the way a magician looks when they've practiced the trick enough to forget the audience still wants to believe it's real. Her voice rose above the room. "Okay, so next. Item 14, the gold heirloom locket, listed as gifted from Mom to Isolde 2018. She said it like a fact. Like weather. I unzipped my folder and pulled out the receipt. Not just any receipt. One dated 3 months before Mom's last hospitalization. Jewelry shop logo. Line item. Custom engraved gold locket, paid in full. I flipped it over and held it up. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, "Thank you for reminding me who I raised." Mom. Silence blanketed the room. The kind of silence that feels like someone dropped a plate. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look at Isolde. I just said, this wasn't gifted to her. It was returned for a repair. It was mine to give, not hers to take. One cousin looked away. Another mouthed a quiet, "Oh, damn." A third just stared at the floor, probably rethinking every time they'd nodded along with Isolde's version of events. Then I reached into the folder again. I slid a second paper across the coffee table, just far enough for everyone to see but no one to pretend they hadn't. A screenshot of the estate inventory, metadata box circled in red. Last edited 5 days after she passed, I said, tapping the date. No dramatics, just truth, like a pebble dropped in still water. Isolde's expression didn't change much, but her posture did. She shifted in her chair, suddenly less queenly, suddenly more cornered. Nobody said a word. For several beats, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Then someone cleared their throat. "So," said Uncle Frank, slow and wary, "is the estate being handled legally?" Micah looked at Isolde. "Should we bring in mediation, just to be safe?" Isolde didn't answer. She just picked up the inventory folder, closed it carefully, and walked out. No flounce, no tears, just retreat. I watched her go, her back straight, but her silence louder than any rebuttal. "They didn't want a confrontation," I said, mostly to myself. "They wanted quiet compliance." But what they got was evidence, with timestamps. After a few more minutes of awkward page flipping and low murmurs, the room began to thin out. A few people approached me, not to apologize, not exactly, just to make eye contact again, to remind me they knew how to blink. I didn't need their apologies. I hadn't come for that. I came because if someone was going to rewrite the ending, they were going to have to write over something first. As I packed up my folder, a cousin touched my arm. "I didn't know," she said. "I know," I replied. And I did. That's the thing about silence. It used to protect Isolde. Now it proved who stayed quiet too long. The next day, somewhere between the last of the funeral leftovers and the slow unraveling of family civility, it happened. It wasn't planned. Not by me. It was a niece, one of Isolde's step-grandkids, maybe 14, who went live on Instagram during the post-service brunch at the lodge. Just bored enough, just tech-savvy enough, just detached enough to think nothing bad ever happens when your phone's in your hand. The camera was shaky. The screen caught half a fruit tray and a blurred elbow. But the audio? Crystal clear. She never mattered to Mom. That's why she got nothing. We just gave her something so she'd stay quiet. Isolde's voice. Sharp, flat, unmistakable. I wasn't in the room when it happened. I was in the hallway, pouring myself a cup of weak coffee, scrolling through condolences that meant well, but sat flat. And then my phone buzzed. Again. Then again. Is this real? Did you see this? Olivia, check this. I opened the link and felt my stomach drop, not out of shock, but recognition. It wasn't just what she said. It was how easily she said it, like she'd practiced it, like it had been said before, just never caught on tape. The live stream had stayed up for 11 minutes before someone, probably a panicked relative, realized it was public. But it was too late. The video had been recorded, clipped, and forwarded faster than you could say, delete. When I stepped back into the room, the energy had changed. People were staring, not at me, not directly. But no one was laughing anymore. No one was grazing the cheese platter or asking about hotel checkout times. Phones were out, heads were down. The social current had shifted, and I didn't have to swim against it anymore. Isolde was nowhere in sight. I wandered toward the photo display in the next room. I hadn't been back to it since the first night. I stood in front of the collage of family moments, vacations, birthdays, baby showers, the usual script. One frame caught my eye. A family portrait from 2 years ago. I remembered it clearly. We'd all gathered for Uncle Ray's retirement. I'd flown in last minute, canceled meetings, brought Mom's favorite lemon bars. In the photo on display, I was missing. No. Folded. The edge of the picture had been carefully bent just enough to crop me out. You could still see my shoulder, barely. A sliver of the dress I wore. I reached up, unpinned the photo, and unfolded the edge. There I was, pressed to the margin like an afterthought. That's not neglect. I whispered to myself. That's surgery! And it was deliberate. I left the photo unfolded, pinning it back with the crease flattened. If they wanted to edit me out, they'd have to start again. Then, from behind me, a voice. I saw the video, said a woman I hadn't met before. Late 60s, silver hair, posture like she ran a choir. That wasn't grief. That was vanity. I nodded. She's always been good at appearances. The woman smiled softly. Well, appearances crack. Yours held. I thanked her, not because I needed to, but because she wasn't wrong. A few moments later, Isolde walked back in, face blank, shoulders squared, pretending nothing had happened. That was her talent, after all, surviving scandals by pretending they weren't happening. But the room no longer moved with her. People shifted when she passed, not rudely, just enough. Someone cleared their throat a little louder. Another stood and walked to the other side of the room without a word. And then a cousin, Lauren, the one who used to ignore my birthday texts, approached me. I should have said something sooner, she said. I raised an eyebrow. About what? About everything. You know, you didn't deserve this. I know. She nodded, eyes damp but clear. If you ever need anything, I'll say it, in writing. I almost smiled. That was when I realized the silence that had defined this family wasn't just mine anymore. They folded me out. But now, the world unfolded them. By Monday morning, the lodge was mostly empty. Just stray napkins, deflated centerpieces, and the faint scent of lavender cleaner hanging in the air. I stopped by one last time, not because I expected closure, but because closure's never something you get from other people. It's something you steal back, quiet and unannounced. I walked past the front doors, through the corridor where condolence cards were pinned, and that's when I saw it. A letter, printed, taped to the corkboard, right beside a "thank you for attending" sign. It wasn't from anyone in the family. It was from Marjorie, the elderly woman who used to live next door to us, who brought over soup when Mom had pneumonia and never missed church unless it snowed. The heading read, "To the organizers," and the body was short. I find it morally appalling that Dolores's youngest daughter was erased from her mother's farewell. There is no honor in silence when it hides cruelty. There is no legacy in performance when truth is sacrificed for decorum. I didn't need to breathe. Just stood there. Someone had written beneath it in pen. Messy, but clear. Agreed. This is not who Dolores was. I took a picture. I didn't need it for evidence, just for memory. Sometimes proof isn't for them. It's for you when they try to make you forget what you lived. Later that afternoon, while trying to return to some version of routine, an email arrived. No subject line, just a scanned flyer from an estate auction and one short sentence. You might want to see this. I clicked. There, under featured items, was the stone Buddha statue from our sunroom. Mom prayed beside it every morning, ever since her sister passed. It was never just decor. It was a relic of grief, a gift from someone she never stopped missing. Now it was listed as rare antique, no personal ties. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just grabbed my keys and drove. The auction was across town, in a rented warehouse space. I didn't go in. I stayed parked across the street, windows halfway down, air thick with burnt popcorn from a vendor stand nearby. A man I'd never seen before, jeans, ball cap, cargo jacket, walked out, arms wrapped around the statue. He loaded it into the back of his SUV like it was a thrift store find, and just like that, a part of my mother was gone. I thought about running after him, explaining. But for what? He wouldn't know the sound my mother made when she knelt before that statue. He wouldn't hear the whisper of her loss through its presence. Another woman came out a few minutes later, arms full of old photo frames. She caught sight of me, paused. They said you moved on, she said quietly. I see now you were just moved out. She didn't wait for me to respond. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the one Mom had helped me pick out 10 years earlier. I opened my laptop, organized the receipts, the screenshots, the voice memo backups. I compiled every detail: the altered will metadata, the missing files, the inventory switch, the forged tribute letter. I crafted a single anonymous email, addressed it to the 3 nonprofit partners Mom had supported for years. The subject line read, "In honor of Dolores, full transparency matters." I didn't write a long explanation, just dropped the evidence. At the bottom, one line: "Transparency honors the dead. Performance buries them twice." I hit send. Then I closed the laptop, let my hands rest on the wood. And just as I leaned back, another email pinged. No sender. Just a single sentence. "Hi, Olivia. I think you should know what else they sold." It arrived the way truth often does: quiet, unsigned, and late. 1 week after the fallout, a thin envelope slipped under my apartment door. No stamp, no return address. Just my name, written in small, deliberate print. I stood there staring at it, still in my robe, coffee cooling beside the sink, unsure whether I wanted to open it or frame it like an artifact. Inside was a letter, not typed, not copied, handwritten. My mother's script. The loopy L's. The precise dots on every I. It was dated 3 weeks before she passed. "Liv, I never said it enough, but your quiet strength is the reason I slept in peace the last 5 years. I never worried about you because you never made your pain anyone else's responsibility. That is grace most people never learn. Forgiveness is not weakness. Silence is not forgetfulness. Love, Mom." I didn't cry. I folded it slowly and set it on my desk next to the printout of the estate spreadsheet, the one where I was listed as other beneficiaries, none. I didn't scan it, didn't email it to anyone, didn't add it to my cloud archive of truth. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't even evidence. It was confirmation. This wasn't for them to know. It was for me to never forget. That afternoon, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. "Olivia?" a voice said, unsure. "It's Derek, from the service." I knew which cousin he was, the one who used to crack jokes at every family dinner, who got quieter the older we all got. He paused. I knew something was off, but I didn't know how to help. "You didn't have to help," I said. "You just had to stand next to someone before the room cleared." He didn't respond right away, but he didn't hang up either. We sat in that silence together, and it didn't feel like punishment this time. Just space. Honest space. Later that night, an email arrived. This one wasn't anonymous. It was from Isolde. Subject line: "Family Reflection Dinner, this Saturday." Body: "We're hoping to gather and reconnect, to move forward in the spirit of healing and unity. We'd love for you to join us, to rejoin the family in spirit." I read it twice, then a third time, not out of consideration, but disbelief. I didn't reply right away. I let it sit in my inbox for hours, like a message in a language I used to speak, but no longer trusted. By 9:42 p.m., I typed a short response. "I haven't left. You all just stopped seeing me." I didn't add a sign-off, didn't soften the edges. It wasn't cruel, it was just clear. That night, I placed the handwritten letter in a small wooden box. No label, no explanation. Just a place where it couldn't be touched by edited documents or well-meaning platitudes. Some truths don't need defending. They just need not be deleted. The knock came late in the afternoon, just as the sun dipped low enough to cut diagonally across my living room floor. I wasn't expecting anyone. No deliveries, no appointments. Just the quiet that I'd come to realize wasn't loneliness. It was space I'd earned. When I opened the door, there stood Marjorie. No coat, no umbrella. Just a small envelope in her hand, and the same steady look I remembered from every year she watched me grow up through her kitchen window. "I thought you should have this," she said. She didn't linger, didn't offer tea. She handed me the envelope like it weighed something heavier than paper. Dolores gave it to me years ago, she added. Said to pass it on when the time was right. And then she turned and walked away. No fuss. No farewell. Just a handoff of something sacred. I shut the door gently, slid the envelope open, and pulled out a photo. It was us, Mom and me, standing at my book launch in 2016. I'd forgotten the photo existed. The event had been a blur of nervous energy and shaky hands. But there she was, arm around me, beaming like I'd just won the lottery. No tension, no comparison, just pride. On the back, in her unmistakable handwriting, this one made me proud quietly. Not for show, for real. I sat with it for a while, cross-legged on the couch, the photo balanced in my lap. I didn't cry. I just held it. Because it wasn't nostalgia, it was proof. Not of who she was to me, but of who I was to her when no one else was watching. A month later, I moved into a new place, a small townhome near my job. Quiet street, decent light, no family ghosts hanging in the hallways. I decorated simply. Nothing inherited, nothing chosen by committee. Just things I liked, colors I actually wanted, shelves I could fill with whatever I pleased, not reminders of roles I was expected to play. The photo didn't go on the mantle. It went in a small frame on a private bookshelf. Not for guests. For me. They'd erased me from rooms. I just stopped asking to be in them. A few weeks after settling in, I received another email. This one from the estate attorney. Subject: Final arbitration of disputed items. I didn't even open it. I clicked delete. Then, in my planner, I wrote across that date in ink. First year not carrying anyone else's grief. Not mine to hold. Not anymore. That weekend, I took my favorite paperback and walked to the park across from the water treatment plant. Not a scenic view by most standards, but it had a bench that never got taken. I sat, cracked open the spine of the book, and pulled the photo from between the pages where I kept it tucked. It was a bookmark now, a reminder. Not just of her love, but of my survival. The sun warmed my back. A jogger passed. A kid on a scooter laughed too loud, and I whispered, "They'll tell their story," but I archived mine. I wasn't angry anymore. Some people inherit a house, others, a burden. Me? I inherited the right to let go.